Well, okay. I'll be honest with you. Was there any way I could have started this review and not started it like this? What's up there, folks? I'm Mark. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we are going to be talking about the newest movie from Edgar Wright called Baby Driver. So I'm going to try and get through this review before a whole crap ton of fireworks are going off outside, or at least I hope that's fireworks. So let me talk briefly about what I like so much about Edgar Wright beyond just the genre deconstruction and reappropriation. Because of course you're going to get that. The zombie spoof that turned into so much more, and the zombie spoof really before zombie spoofs were more of a thing. Then you had the whole situation with Hot Fuzz and the buddy cop movie that again got a little bit more deconstructed. Then you had the whole situation that came with like World's End, which is a body snatchers movie that said a hell of a lot more about alcoholism than I think anybody would have expected. And you have to wonder what Ant-Man could have been if it might have been more of a deconstruction of the superhero genre before Marvel booted him off the project. And still, Ant-Man was a pretty good movie, but I really would have loved to see what Edgar Wright could have done with that. But I think the movie that reminded me the most of what I got in Baby Driver, which by the way is fantastic, you all need to see it right the hell now, is Scott Pilgrim vs. the World. Because on the surface, it should be a little bit hipster, twee, kind of insufferable, and yet it still kind of amazingly manages to work. Because think about it, it's a story about Canadian indie rockers who are kind of whiny, kind of a little bit up their own ass. It's very much of a millennial movie, but at the same time, there is a core to it that actually makes it work. The editing, the pace, the flow, it's almost borderline at points like a music video. Yeah, if you said that about Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, with all of its soundtrack that was partially recorded by Beck specifically for that movie, in order they can possibly capture that more lo-fi garage feel and get that level of authenticity. If that was the warm-up music video, this is the full-length premiere, because there is a level of focus on music specifically in this movie, which kind of makes me an ideal critic to talk about it, but also says so much more in its symbolism and what it represents for both our main character and really the entire plot of the film that needs to be talked about here. But let's get through the basic elements here that you might have already seen in the trailers. Because on the surface, it's a pretty standard heist movie, with our main driver, who is literally named Baby, just being such a great driver because, well, he had to pick up something when both his parents were killed in a car crash and his ears were partially damaged. In order to block out the tinnitus, he's got his headphones here all the time. Hell, he's even got more than one iPod, just like I do, in order to perfectly capture the soundtrack of that situation. He records people's conversations in order to recapture them and remix them and re-loop them for him to listen over and over again. There is something so unbelievably millennial about that, taking that little fragments of pop culture and re-blending it all together. And he is the kind of guy who will listen to everything. But on the surface then, still pretty standard heist movie. He's got that one last job to make it out before he hops in a car with a girl that he just met and fell in love with so fast, drive the car they can't afford and drive off on the road into nowhere. There is something so quintessentially drenched in a certain American dream and ideal that it almost feels a little bit hilarious when this movie starts to subvert that, and oh, believe me, we're gonna get to it. Because that's the funny thing about this film. While it might seem like it falls in that sort of stock type of the kid who's trying to make it out of a life of crime but just gets pulled back in for that one last job and then everything goes horribly wrong. Yeah, you think you all expected to see this coming. But then the layers start peeling back. Like the one when you surround Kevin Spacey's character of the mastermind. He's effectively playing a slightly grubbier version of Frank Underwood until he's not. John Hamm with his girlfriend, they're flirting relentlessly. They're playing the couple in crime. And then you see something that's a little bit more twisted beneath that. And then you have the main character from Jamie Foxx who plays a villain that is actually kind of legitimately terrifying, and you're always supposed to be placed a little bit on edge about how unstable he really is, and then you're not, especially with considering how his character will exit the film and the timing of when that character exits too. Now, a lot of people have given criticism surrounding Ansel Elgort as Baby that he doesn't exactly have a lot of range. I see that criticism, I don't ultimately agree with it, partially because he's very much that kind of guy who is very much in his own head constantly listening to that music. He's got that introverted record collection that, hell, I have it too. And I wouldn't be surprised if he'd be perfectly comfortable just finding a job as a DJ and just working behind the scenes, or maybe as a record producer. Now, the character I think actually there does deserve to be a little bit more commentary beyond just the expected is our main female character played by Lily James, Deborah. I liked her character. She certainly captures that ideal, that romantic stock type character. And the romance, there's definitely chemistry there, especially given what they have to work with. But at the same time, it's a little bit, I don't know, she kind of falls a little hot and fast before, again, the third act comes in and shifts things up in ways that you will not see coming. But what I want to talk about more here is the music, because I can talk to you about the gun battles and how they are remarkably bloody, or you have the situation where a lot of it is very much talking about the typical heist things and things go wrong. You can kind of predict a lot of the overall arc, at least throughout the first 2/3 of this film. And yeah, there's definitely specific jokes that I think are so well timed in that classic balance between action and humor and genuine horror, and some of the like framing and how these scenes are actually set up, especially when it comes to how that music's coming through in the background and the characters that provide the real heel turns. And I can talk to you about the car stunts, which are freaking ridiculous, my god. But I want to talk about more is the music, because the music is what makes this movie. Because when you think about it, as I described before, if Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was the start of that music video, this is the larger premiere. This is Edgar Wright taking all his fascination with music cues and balancing out and turning them beyond just non-diegetic stuff and very much incorporating it with the rest of the diegesis of the film, things that are actually happening. So when Baby has his headphones in, the music's a little louder. He often will choreograph his motions. That's how he lives his life. Almost to the point where I got out of the movie, I'm like, I kind of want to put headphones in and dance around the same way he does. But at the same time, when you pull the headphones out, soundtrack ebbs back a little bit. There's less diegetic sound in the scene. It overall sets the point of being that thrumming causality that works and drives everything in his character, to the point where the one man that he can communicate with the most, the closest thing that he has to a friend, is a deaf man who can still pick up on all that soul music through the feel, through something that's a little bit more tactile, someone who actually gets the deeper underlying element of that film. And that's something I kind of really do admire, is that they're actually willing to explore hearing and sound as much as they do, beyond just the craft, but also into the text of the film. When you have characters who are actively asking him, what are you listening to? What are you playing? People will have conversations about music. People will have conversations about the music that Baby's listening to, what they like to listen to, and to the point where, yeah, some of the music cues are a tad on the nose, especially if you know what's actually happening. But at the same time, I'm not going to deny that it works. I'm not going to deny that the hyper-stylism of this movie, and make no mistake, it is pretty damn stylized, but it fits the heightened emotion. It feels like a music video. It works in broad archetypes, sure, but then it subverts them around the edges. It shows that how that music, at its very best, it can capture that broad, soaring feeling and then kind of subvert it, do little weird, twisted things with it, like in the third act of this movie, where it gets a lot bloodier and you see characters that at the first glimpse you would not expect to be as violent as they turn out to be. It gets kind of graphic, I'm not gonna lie there. And then you start realizing the music stands for something more than just what it is. Of course, it is what it is in terms of driving Baby's overall idea, the fact that he has multiple iPods, records everything, tries to remix it all, tries to bring it all together. But music is standing in for lifeblood, or spirit, let's call it that. Something that drives him forward, something that actually has him on that overarching through line, something that actually is compelling him to go forward. And when he shares that playlist, when he shares that musical connection with another person, of course there's going to be that instant chemistry and falling in love. Kind of funny when you look in the actual between the lines, that a lot of this music stuff, a lot of how that's all being driven, it also could stand as a pretty hefty metaphor when it comes to how Americana is decaying in this film, where people will gradually lose their hearing if they don't pick up on that deeper soul, and that reflects the Americana that's decaying in the environment of Atlanta that surrounds in the city. And it also showcases when the fact that when that music is constantly playing, when that music is constantly driving the film, and constantly driving that romance, it does play out in broad, stylized Americana that calls back to that dream, and then yet is always confronted with the little realities that come with these situations. It showcases characters who are very, very plainly violent criminals, and in some cases not all that bright criminals at that, but it showcases how things go wrong, or when the soundtrack kind of skips or goes off tune, and when one particular character in the final showdown, it shoots right past Baby, once on each side of his head, sound goes harsh. the tinnitus acts up even more strongly. He can't hear in the same way. It's almost kind of inspiring how that can be so much more of an incapacitating blow than just a shot to the chest. And that's the other thing, is that the way this movie ends, and I think it's actually kind of inspired in its ending, but also it's one of the points where the music video element tilts right back towards cheese a little bit too much. Because yes, he is confronted with the reality, baby, is at the very end of the whole situation. And he actually winds up serving some pretty hefty consequences. But at the same time, they're consequences that I actually found, well, as much as they are realistic, it does paint him walking out the door at the end and still seeing his beautiful girl and hopping in the car they can't afford and driving off into the sunset. I think that it is overall an embrace of broader iconography that, yeah, kind of fits a whole millennial ideal, that fits that sort of millennial earnestness when confronted with the reality around him, especially when he's had to face it, accommodate it, and come out stronger with the earnestness intact. At the same time, though, it's kind of cheesy. I'm not going to deny that. And that's the other thing. Like, when I saw this with a friend of mine, the comment that she made was that this movie reminded her a lot of Nick and Nora's Infinite Playlist. And I can see that. In terms of the romantic dynamics, in terms of how much music underscores a lot of the plot, the fact that they have that connection there through song that represents something ultimately much more, yeah, it can feel a little bit hokey, it can feel a little bit cheesy, and I can definitely see some people who are more dismissive of Edgar Wright's films dismissing that level of earnestness and that level of emotional intelligence to clue in to what that music represents for various characters. Kevin Spacey gets it. John Hamm eventually gets it. Jamie Foxx's character gets it in a certain dark, twisted way, but that's more because how he can see through a lot of those masks that people create with their sound, when it becomes less of a soundtrack and more of a defense mechanism. But beyond that, hot damn, I love this movie. It is so intelligent in the way that it interweaves music with the diegesis in the narrative, how strong the thematic lines are on what is otherwise a pretty basic heist movie, down to the point that there is a theft from a post office, another dying American institution that gets ignored. I find it a little bit hilarious considering how postage comes back in for the final montage at the end of the movie, but really it makes a certain amount of sense. It actually, the number of little interconnected elements makes me want to see this movie again and again, beyond just some of the on-the-nose soundtrack choices. I really thought this was a frighteningly intelligent, funny, amazingly well-edited movie, as you would expect from Edgar Wright and his crew. And yeah, 9 out of 10. It's one of those to beat this year along with Get Out. I heartily enjoyed this. I will recommend seeing this so many more times. It's a little bit bloodier than you would expect, a little bit more graphic than you would expect, and some of the cameos are inspired if you're watching for them. But beyond that, yeah, check this out. In the meantime, I got a soundtrack. I might want to hit that road. Actually, I got music reviews that I gotta do, so I've got like a slow dive review that I'm finally gonna do. New Pornographers 2, then I maybe get to Calvin Harris. In other words, I got a playlist. I got places to go. I'm Mark, and I'll see you next time.